launch team wishes you good luck and Godspeed.
Space Monkeys, blasting off with Kenny Lee, the co-founder of Manta. It's been a long time coming, but we're very happy to have him on the show. Kenny, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me here.
Yeah.
Glad to be here.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you here. You have a very exciting project going on. Something we've been covering on the show lately is your trusted setup. This is looking to be like 6 times larger than the former record holder of trusted setups, done by Tornado Cash. What can you tell us about, first of all, what a trusted setup is and why it's so vital to the rest of the Manta roadmap?
Yeah, so in order for us to launch our ZKP circuit as securely as possible, we need to create like a password for it. You can think of it like you have a wallet, and every time you interact with the wallet, you need your private key to interact with it, right? So we're generating this private key for the ZKP. But the issue is that if I alone generate that ZKP, then I'm a single point of failure, right? And so something could happen. I could accidentally reveal it. Someone could steal my laptop, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And so instead of me generating it myself, we are going to decentralize it. And so that's what a trusted setup ceremony does. It essentially allows anyone in the world to participate in creating this private key. And so the creators of the private key are no longer just myself, but I can create a piece, you can create a piece, right? Like other projects can create pieces, individuals, groups, everyone can create a piece of it. And so right now, we have, I think, over 8,000 people registered to prepare to create a piece of it.
Crazy.
So yeah, it's going to be pretty exciting, pretty decentralized. Like you mentioned, it would be the largest in the world by far if everyone participated. I think there'll be some attrition, but we'll see.
Right.
Our fingers crossed.
No doubt. I saw in the docs there's something to do with so they help create the password and then they throw something away so it can never be,
Right.
put back together. What's that all about?
Yeah, so it's just an extra layer of security because if you have that one component, right, which we call toxic waste, then it could potentially be reassembled, right? But as long as just one person out of that 8,000 throws away their quote unquote toxic waste, then it's already secure.
You just need one person to throw away the toxic waste?
Exactly, but I encourage everyone to throw away your toxic waste.
Okay, it's not a souvenir.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Okay, great. And then once you guys get this going, this is happening on Calamari first. Do you have to do this again for Manta?
No. We're using one ZKP circuit for both Calamari and Manta.
Gotcha. Okay, so once that gets going, you guys will be ready to launch the ability to send private transfers between wallets with Manta Pay.
Exactly.
That's right?
Yeah.
So what can you tell us about that product and what that's going to allow us to do?
Yeah, so Manta Pay, it's going to be launched on Calamari first, and then it'll be subsequently launched on Manta once we get our parachain. But right now, for Manta Pay, it's private transacting with any sort of Kusama or Polkadot asset.
Okay.
And so you can think of it like with native KSM, you can think of it with other parachain assets, being able to privatize those and be able to transfer to one another without any sort of information being revealed on chain. And so you can think of it like ZCash, but instead of using just ZCash, you can essentially use any sort of Kusama ecosystem token or a Polkadot ecosystem token.
Okay, that's cool. So if I wanted to privately transfer Kusama, let's just say to myself, for whatever reason, would I have to bridge that over from the relay chain to Calamari, do the private transfer, and then bridge it back over to Kusama?
Yes, except you don't necessarily have to bridge it back to Kusama. You can still keep it in Calamari. It's fully fungible. And so if, let's say, for example, you bring in 10 Kusama, right, and you privatize that KSM, now you have 10 private KSM. You can just keep it in your wallet. You don't have to really move it. And at some point in time, if someone says, hey, can you send me, 5 KSM, you can send them that 5 private KSM. And now it's theirs and it never shows up on chain or anything.
That's cool. And then let's say they wanted to stake it or something, they could send it back to the relay chain.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
That's super cool. But I guess there may be some reasons to keep it on the Calamari chain because the product coming after the Manta Pay is Manta Swap.
Well, we are working. So the roadmap has changed quite a bit.
Okay,
So the
tell us about
swaps
that.
are
Yeah.
before we get into like the swaps and everything, right? Which right now, like I think when we first started with building Manta Network, we were thinking, okay, how do we continue to build like DeFi products? But
Hmm.
as we continued to iterate on Manta, what we've seen is that other parachains, right, like they're starting to emerge and do their stuff really well. And so the question is, okay, why do we need to build all these products on our parachain
Right.
when we can, leverage XCM and start, working with the other parachains?
Okay.
And so that's exactly what we're doing right now. And so we're pursuing different opportunities for further use cases of, our ZKP on other parachains. I can't get into too much detail about that right now, but yeah, it's just some conversations that we are already exploring.
Okay, so you're having some conversations, private conversations with other parachains.
Yeah, some ZK conversations.
Conversations, cool. Okay. Okay, so that's really exciting. So you guys aren't going to build your own decks anymore, which kind of makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
think there are a lot of DEX offerings
I
on
know.
other
Yeah.
parachains, and so what we're thinking about is like how do you privatize those other parachains DEXs?
Wow, and that's going to be possible.
That's the theory.
Would this, in theory, work like here I am on Dex Parachain X, and I just like flip a switch, and now this trade is privatized, or how do you think that will manifest?
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways that it can manifest depending on how we design it. Right, the simplest way is just like a very simple HRMP sort of connection, but that would require moving assets over to our network, right? And whereas like we can get a little bit deeper with the other parachains if we decide to do something like a precompile, but that would mean that it just exposes a little more vulnerability on both sides and security layers. And so there's a lot of sort of conversations that we're having right now to find the best solution.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, depending on what solutions we go with, it could be anywhere as clunky as move it to our parachain or we can just automate a lot of it.
Gotcha. Okay, very exciting stuff. Now, you guys were just hosting a conference in Colombia,
Yeah.
right? What can you tell us about that conference and the group of projects behind it?
Yeah, so all primarily ZK focused projects. So it was called the ZK House. We got a lot of sort of popularity with it. A lot of people wanted to create another ZK House, and so it's something that I think we'll move forward with.
Nice.
Yeah, a lot of interest from other ZK projects to participate in the future. It was a 2-day event. The first day was specifically focused on all sorts of use cases and applications for zero knowledge proofs, and this extends beyond privacy, right? We see zero knowledge proofs in scalability, we see zero knowledge proofs in security and attestation, et cetera, et cetera. And so if you really dive deep into the ZK space, you see all these different use cases for it. And so that's what that day focused on. And then the second day, we primarily focused on privacy. And so brought in projects like NIM and Aztec as well, right? NIM themselves not being a ZK project, but a privacy-focused project. And so, that was a lot of conversation around the privacy and, regulatory side compliance. Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed a shift in conversation in crypto in the last even year, where kind of before it was like we're going to build a parallel system and we don't care about the old system, but now it's a lot more about working with regulators, and I saw you guys using a lot of language around educating people who are creating these rules. What's your relationship with regulators so far, and what do you think the path forward is so we can get privacy on chain, which is maybe a fundamental right, but still play good with the people who are in power?
Yeah, I think regardless of if you subscribe to the idea that we should build a whole parallel universe of applications or not, right? Even in that parallel universe, unless you want it to just be complete chaos, it still needs to be in some way regulated.
Yeah.
And so right now, right, the question is, how do you regulate this type of environment? Because it's awesome that you have all this freedom and all this access, but at the same time, there are a lot of bad actors. I think we see exploits, hacks happening every single day now.
Yeah.
Well, maybe every single day is an exaggeration, but there's a lot
Maybe.
of them, right?
Yeah.
And so, do we allow these people to get away with it, right? I mean, if you're the hacker, maybe you say yes, but everyone else who lost money in it is probably like, who do we turn to, right? And so I think like the general sort of ecosystem is now starting to realize that like, there does need to be some type of, checks and balances. In terms of the regulatory ecosystem, especially as it relates to privacy, a lot of the conversation right now focuses on Tornado Cash, inevitably, right? Especially with the OFAC sanctions. I think it's a little bit misconstrued, though, because Tornado Cash, especially with OFAC intervention rather than like FinCEN intervention or other regulatory bodies, right? Like the question is like, why did OFAC intervene? OFAC specifically focuses on national security threats, right? Enemies of the state.
Okay.
Whereas other regulatory bodies, for example, like FinCEN, they focus on financial crimes.
Right.
And then the SEC focuses on securities and whether something is or isn't a securities. And that type of fraud. And so, like out of these three players, why was OFAC the group that decided to, pursue Tornado Cash, right?
Yeah.
The answer, although it's highly speculative, but the idea here is that it's not because Tornado Cash is necessarily a privacy tool. Because if you read, for example, like FinCEN's sort of mandates, right? It's like they say, okay, you can use anonymous tools and privacy tools as long as those tools are being used in a legal way.
Right. Okay.
And so, like if FinCEN suspected too much, why wasn't FinCEN the one to step in for Tornado Cash? Why was OFAC? Well, it's because of North Korea. Right? It's because Lazarus Group, when they hacked Ronin, what did they get, like 600 million from that hack, and they funneled it through Tornado Cash, right? I mean, like Tornado Cash essentially has become a tool for North Korean hackers, and so that's, I think, why OFAC decided to step in. But the way that OFAC stepped in and the way that we see just general trends of regulators kind of slamming down on Web3 is, like the intention, I hope, is a good intention, but the execution is kind of exposes a lack of understanding of exactly how Web3 works, right? So, for example, when OFAC decided, okay, we're just going to sanction these smart contracts or these wallet addresses associated with these smart contracts, right? And then we're going to stop North Korea. Well, it stopped everyone.
Right.
It stopped the guy who's trying to move his money through Tornado Cash just so that his colleagues don't see his payroll.
Yeah, right.
So like I think like the action itself emphasizes that there's this disconnect in understanding on how Web3 works and how regulators want to regulate. And so, being in the Web3 space, this goes full circle back to your comment about like the about how, I was saying that, we need to educate regulators in the space. We need to. Otherwise, they continue to impose these sorts of rules, which, for better or for worse, are, hopefully with good intention, but the execution itself just creates more problems.
Understood. So how does Manta Pay remain compliant? What's built into the product that will allow people to, show the government what they're doing if they're asked or anything like that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different things that we're looking at right now in terms of like the product deployment that helps us with the compliance side, because I think at the end of the day for us, right, like while we want to be as as open of a system as possible, at the same time, right, like I don't think anyone wants to be the person who's facilitated bad things, right?
Yeah.
So the question is like, how do you detect that? And so we do have tools for that. I can't get into too much of the details about it, but we provide self-sovereign auditability. And so what we mean by that is essentially like you're able to reveal all of your information on an individual basis. You have a separate key, which we call a viewing key, and whoever you decide to give that viewing key to then has access to all of your transaction history.
Wow. Okay.
And so if you are, audited, for example, and, they say, give me all your historical transaction information, you can provide that viewing key as proof of all the transactions that you've made.
Interesting. Okay. Well, that will reveal all the transactions, or can you just like show individual ones, or?
Currently, it's all the transactions.
Right.
I think that in the future, we would love to kind of like make it a lot more granular.
Yeah.
But currently, yeah, it's all the transactions.
So you have this viewing key for kind of the individual to stay compliant, and then you also said that you have tools to maybe detect illegal activity happening on the network as well, but can't get too deep into that. But just as far as like decentralizing the network goes, how do we put these tools in the hands of governance or the community, or are we always going to have kind of like a council or governing body to look out for these bad actors?
I guess there's two categories of tools. One category of these tools would be more so focused on the self-sovereign level, which is the tax reporting, auditing, et cetera, and that's on an individual basis, right? If the IRS were to come to us and say turn over all the transactions that have happened on your network, that's absolutely nothing we can do, right? So the power is on the individual level. On the other hand, right, I think there's different aspects of implementations that can be not exactly gatekeepers, but more so filters that are more on just the product level. And so these could be like, for example, if you are an OFAC sanctioned address and you're attempting to move money through our privacy network, we're like, no. Right.
Right. Right.
That's a big no-no.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting stuff. It seems like a lot of responsibility to be the co-founder of this project. I mean, are you like seeing what happened with Tornado Cash and stuff? Are you haunted at all by what could happen or what could happen with the thing that you're building?
I mean, it's definitely scary, but at the same time, right? Like I think that anyone, whether you're a regulator, whether you're a user, whoever you are,
Yeah.
I think it's inevitable that privacy is a critical piece of security for you or the people that you need to care about. Even on a government level, right? I don't think that if you think about like Web3, like where is it going to go? Three ways. It can either completely collapse, it can be like stagnating what it is today, or it can grow into something tremendous and everyone starts using it and it really like. And in this third scenario, which I think like everyone's kind of building towards, in this scenario, privacy, you can't have it without privacy, even on a governmental level, right? Because then when other people start tracking your citizens, when your enemies of state start tracking your citizens through on-chain data, right? How are you going to protect them? How are you going to protect your own national security, your own data, right?
Of course.
So I think like privacy needs to be implemented, it needs to be built out, and needs to be on-chain. The question is just how. And so like more than the fear of Tornado Cash as a case study, I think like the bigger question is like, how do you do it? How do you put privacy on chain in a way that can like be the best of everything?
Gotcha. Yeah. Cool. Okay. When did you start thinking about privacy? When did you become obsessed with privacy in your life?
Yeah. Back in 2018, I was going through my MBA. And that's actually where I met my co-founders. So Victor was doing his master's in econ at Harvard, and then Shumo, he was working at Algorand as a research scientist. He was building out their smart contracts layer, and then I was doing my MBA at Sloan. And during the summer, I interned at this AI company, and I won't get into details about the AI company, but it was specifically on image recognition. And image recognition, the top use case of image recognition is facial recognition, right? You scan your iPhone and all this other stuff, cameras, et cetera, et cetera. And, at first I got into it because I wanted to understand like how this all works and like just get a deep dive, like firsthand look at everything. It was very cool at first, but then things started getting really scary because like I was looking at these like products and stuff that were being sold.
To who? Who is the customer base?
A lot of corporations and private entities, governments too.
Right.
Okay, so one was this 5-kilometer range camera that you put on top of tall buildings and skyscrapers and hills and the tops of like parks and stuff, and it just like rotates and sweeps the area and just collects everyone's face. Right? It's not just like one individual at a time. It's like sweeping like 5, 10, 100 people in a frame and just like collecting their faces and knowing exactly where they are, right?
Wow.
Who they are, et cetera, et cetera. Right. And so like you've got well, now, I'm walking around New York City and I see these cameras at the top of the building. I'm like, fuck, like so
Right.
this sort of massive surveillance state, like that experience showed me that it's a lot worse than we originally thought. Right. You think you have some sort of personal freedom and it's not, it's all a facade. It's not even just about privacy, but it's more about the question of control, right? Like how much control do you want to give to others versus how much control do you want for yourself? And I feel like right now it's no longer a question or a choice because all the control is given away. Right? It's not even just like cameras staring at your face and knowing where you are and people making sure that you are where you are, but it's like, when you're on the internet and you see ads driven to you, right? Like these are not just random ads. These are targeted to like make you think a certain way and make you think more of that way. But I don't think that's exactly what the internet's intended to do. And I don't think that like that's good for the individual. So giving the individual that choice of being private, being able to take back some level of control, I think that's very important, and that's what I recognized through that experience.
Amazing. So that was relatively recently.
Yeah.
Where did the idea of building a privacy focused product on the blockchain come from?
Yeah, so I was at that company doing the internship, and Victor was, we had kind of known each other because we were both in the blockchain space, and we were basically neighbors. And so he comes to me one day and he's like, hey, you're working at this AI company, right? There's this other AI company and they want to explore like some blockchain use cases for like, facial and image recognition and identity. And so I just sat with Victor and, that other company and we just started talking about it and just came up with all these ideas around like, okay, how do you provide this use case for identity and tracking and incentivization and all this other stuff? But it all came back to like, okay, but how do you protect their privacy? Right. And then like, I think like that's when we realized like, okay, there's not any sort of privacy solution. And especially on chain, anyone can snoop in. That's a huge problem. And so like, it doesn't exist today because applications on chain are still very rudimentary. But if you scale it out 5 to 10 years from now and these applications do exist, who's protecting the user anymore?
Right.
So yeah, that's how it started. And then like that project didn't really go anywhere. And then Victor and Shumo worked on some projects as well with like Intel SGX using TE environments. And then eventually we decided, okay, you know what, like the way that this is actually going to have to work is through zero knowledge proofs. Yeah.
Amazing.
So we explored various different aspects.
Now, I saw you in a talk recently. You were saying that I don't really know the language for it, but resolving your ZK proofs is 60 times faster than what they're doing on Monero, I think it was, right?
ZCash.
On ZCash.
10 times faster than Zcash.
10 times faster than
Yeah,
ZCash.
yeah.
Okay, I thought it was like 2 minutes down to 2 seconds.
Oh, that's just with industry standards. So like if it's out the box, it's like 2 minutes. And
Okay.
then we've got it down to 2 to 5 seconds.
Okay,
Yeah.
and you kind of made a point to say like, well, it's not you, it's your team that kind of made this happen. Your team of cryptographers.
Right.
What's it like working in a company where there's like people doing kind of magical things that maybe like you couldn't do yourself, but they're just kind of like building all this around you?
Yeah, I was actually after the Polkadot summit yesterday, I went back to the WeWork with our CTO, and then there were a couple of other engineers there, and they were just having a conversation. And while they were having a conversation, I was like responding to some emails, and then I tried to jump back into the conversation, but like it just felt like they were already light years ahead.
Yeah.
And the way that I described it is just like it's like you're trying to walk across a racetrack and all the other cars are already going 120 miles an hour.
Right.
Where you're trying to catch up to them. And it's just like, yeah, it's definitely very invigorating for the mind. It's also like, yeah, like you just got to keep up because there's so many innovative things happening on blockchain, on substrate, on ZKPs, in cryptography, right? Like, it's just you're pulled in all directions. I don't think it's just unique to the fact that we're running with like ZKPs. I think like a lot of different blockchain companies are probably experiencing the same thing.
Right, interesting. And you're already, like we were talking before, you're already working with those other companies.
Some of them,
Yeah, some of them.
Not all of them. Not all of them.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Are there still some like hardcore privacy focused blockchain projects that are, kind of talking in the old way, like we're just gonna like make everything private so the government can never see? And is that still like a narrative, or?
The projects that we've talked to, I don't really see anyone saying, screw the government.
Right.
Yeah. I think everyone is saying, how do we deploy this to get it into the hands of everyone and protect everyone's individual privacy, and keep it up and running? Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. So last question for you here. Where do you see this going? You're working with this team as far as like privacy on the substrate technology goes. Where do you see this going in the next 5 years? What's kind of the dream scenario ahead of you?
So our company, right, our project, our team, we're called Poseidon Labs. And so under Poseidon Labs, we have different deployments. We have Manta Network, we have Calamari Network, right? These are what's coming out in the short term. We're doing a lot of research on like, Ethereum L2 solutions and Turing completeness and Solidity smart contracts as well. We're doing a lot of research into like gaming and social stuff, but anyway,
Okay,
so
cool.
that's the labs component. And so what I'm trying to say here is that like we've got our tentacles everywhere right now, and I think like wherever we touch, what we realize is that there's so much need for privacy. And so one example that that we're doing with the hackathon here at ETHSF is we're building on-chain private poker. And this is like something that we're hacking together this weekend or something. So, don't expect it to be like a new token or something, right?
Okay.
But like, it's just it's a fun idea, use case that we wanted to showcase, because gaming actually can benefit a lot from ZK. And so what you notice is that right now, like a lot of on-chain games, it's all like, it's pretty centralized, other than like the token transfers and the NFT transfers. Everything else is centralized. And so poker has to be the same way, because right now, if I were to say play poker on the blockchain with you, then if I have my hand here and you have your hand there, you can just view my hand by looking at a block explorer.
Right.
And so that defeats the whole purpose of the game, right? And so you can't build poker on chain unless you have some layer of privacy. And so applying ZK to that, right, allows you to now play poker fully on chain. And the beauty of that is that despite the fact that it's private, it's still verifiable.
Right.
And so the added advantage here is that when you have a centralized poker game at like pokercasino.com, I don't know if that's a real website or not, but let's say example, we're at pokercasino.com. How do we know that pokercasino.com isn't gaming the whole thing to make a little bit of extra cash for themselves? Right. But for a ZK poker game, because zero knowledge proofs are verifiable, then you can prove that a shuffle happened the way that it happened, so that the individuals can understand, okay, this was not a gamed shuffle, right? This was an actual randomized shuffle. And you can continue to shuffle it however much you want. And each time it can be verified that it was a randomized shuffle. And so it creates a much fairer game than you can get in a Web 2 space.
Right. And I guess that counts not only for poker games, but for financial games and social games and governance games and all the games we play as humans.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Life is a game.
Life is just a game. Dude, Kenny, it's very, very nice talking to you. And I just want to thank you very much for building this for everybody in the ecosystem and everybody who's going to be here. You're a great spokesperson and representative of the entire ecosystem. And,
appreciate it.
Yeah, I absolutely mean it. And I can't wait to talk to you again.
Yeah, sounds good, man.
Cool.
Thanks for having
buddy.
me.